The title of my work is Absence, and it's exploring the nature and existence of feelings. And there's more of a focus on the result of what concealing those emotions and feelings does to an individual. Some people feel burdened by sharing how they feel with others, so they create a false exterior to protect themselves and others from that. The materials I used was charcoal and just various thicknesses of fine liner. When creating it, I created a template and then did like a loose line sketch, and then from there went and added in the charcoal and the fine liner. I worked quite intimately with it, so standing back from it, coming forward again, just to make sure all the elements worked well together. And to create those loose organic lines, I actually attached a piece of charcoal to the end of a paintbrush and extended my arm so that they were organic and raw as possible. The most challenging part would definitely be making sure all the small aspects of it worked well and cohesively together, because I know I'd focus on smaller areas and I'd step back from it and be like, oh, that doesn't blend with the rest of the portrait. The starting points and influences for my work this year would be my desire to explore conceptual portraiture, so the idea of concept being conveyed through the portrait being more important than the portrait itself. And that idea probably came from one of the artists we studied this year, Frida. I liked how she would communicate a narrative or a story from an experience she'd been through. And that was more of what I focused on in her portraits than the face itself. My plans for this year is I'm going to do my Bachelor of Nursing at Deakin Uni. Although my course isn't in art or creating anything, I am wanting to have a creative outlet next year and hopefully maybe do some art classes or something just to expand my skills. The advice I would give to students doing studio art or arts next year would be pick a theme or a concept that you are passionate about, because I know when I was exploring something that I wasn't as enthusiastic about, I found it really hard to work creatively and come up with new ideas, and also to work in your folio throughout the year as much as you can, because I know if I go back to the start of the year, I would have never thought of creating something like this, and it was all that exploration that I did that generated my ideas.
The title of my artwork is Memento Mori, which is Latin for Remember You Must Die, and essentially it's about neglecting like the material items of life in place for like morals and being a good person, because life is fleeting and transient, so you should really take priority of like being a good person. And it's kind of like my own critique of my own items and possessions, to see like, you know, up against death, they're not really that meaningful or useful in comparison to being a good person. I made my artwork on a canvas, so essentially I made the whole still life setup, and it was a photograph, so I had to get my brother to help me take the photo because I was in it. And then at school I projected it onto the canvas and sketched the shapes out. Then I toned the canvas and blocked in the shapes, and then using a number 0 to a number 2 paintbrush, I painted in all the details. What I found most challenging about my artwork was how long it took. So it took 11 weeks to produce in the middle of ECE, so it was countless late nights and early mornings producing it with a tiny little brush. I also find other artists very inspiring, often art that lives on the polarities of what can be accepted as art. So like Damien Hirst and his like suspended animals, and Mark Quinn's blood sculptures of like his frozen blood, so the more weird the better. In 2019 I'll be studying paramedicine at Australian Catholic University. Art in my life, I hope I will continue to have it in my life because it's just so fascinating, and I want to keep learning about it and making art. Advice I'd give to students taking on art this year, I'd say be passionate about your folio, and I'd recommend talking to your friends, family and teachers about your ideas, because they can help broaden your ideas and expand to help your development. Can also help you clarify your ideas. And then in regards to annotations, I say you should do them as soon as possible and do them in depth, and practice your frameworks all the time in your folio because it will help with your SACs and exams. And keep researching art and art mediums because it'll help you understand art a bit better.
My ink illustration is called Maintaining the Wa, and in terms of wa, this means the harmony in Japanese culture, which is not necessarily the harmony that we would describe. It's more like the social compliance in a society to maintain a harmonious community and to reduce conflict. For my materials, I used a fine liner on 200 GSM mixed media paper. Through this, I utilised cross-hatching and hatching techniques along with stippling to replicate a manga style, especially with the stippling to replicate the screen tone effect that is common with manga. I think the most interesting aspect of my work was probably how I could learn Japanese simultaneously while studying for studio arts, and I think creating it was that's what made it so enjoyable. Where also the most challenging part, I think, was just trying to maintain that workload between each subject. The starting points was when I was given the prompt of, with my exploration proposal, I thought, well, what could I do to express myself the most optimum way? And I thought, I really enjoy the idea of transitioning things, of juxtaposing things, of comparing things. And that's why I decided that I really want to compare a traditional aspect of Japan with the modernistic aspect of Japan. My favourite artist is a Brazilian artist named Gabriel Piccolo. He was a constant general inspiration and constant go-to when I just needed that extra motivation or extra insight into what I was doing. I think the most primarily important thing that a student can do is to, first of all, don't procrastinate, that's just the biggest of all, but also to start early and just let your mind flow a bit. You don't have to be so fixed in your ideas and what you want to do, but instead just consider many possibilities.
My work is called Felt, past tense of feel is like the subtitle, and it's a play on words between feelings and the literal material felt. So my artwork is an outfit, it's a wearable artwork. It's comprised of a bright pink coat and then it's like a set of a white top and white pants. The ideas behind the work started off with me questioning how are mental illness and emotions conveyed through art. Initially I was debating whether to make it from scratch or to use upcycled materials. So I ended up choosing upcycled because it meant that I could go to the op shop and find a coat, for example, with a story behind it. Someone's worn this and loved it and they've got their own memories in that coat, and so it kind of had a deeper meaning than just the literal materials. Definitely the most challenging thing about creating my work was working within the time frame. Textiles is quite, it's not something you can do quickly. And it's not something you can make multiple copies of to try and perfect it each time. You've really got to make sure you're doing it right as you go, otherwise you'll spend hours unpicking, or I spent hours unravelling the cords that I'd mucked up right in the middle of a 6-metre strand. Definitely my favourite artist is Yayoi Kusama. Her energy, her vibrance, it's so full of energy. That's what I really admire. Coming from my theme of mental illness and emotions, her positivity was something that I knew I wanted to draw on and recreate. For students who are going to do art or studio art at a VCE level, I really strongly suggest don't restrict yourself. Don't put any pressure on yourself to know exactly what you're going to do at the start of term 1, and make sure you're exploring every medium, all different forms, scales, colours, different ideas. Feels like your folio, and it makes your artwork better at the end, I think.
The title of my work is In Our Minds, and basically it's around 2,000 to 3,000 pieces of paper that I stuck with about half a litre of glue together, and it opens up and it's meant to represent our emotions, the roller coaster of life and all that kind of stuff. I made a few squeezy bottle tools kind of things to draw lines on the paper. I had to go through heaps of trialling and seeing what works best for me. And the most challenging thing for me was definitely finding an idea and one main theme, because I had so many ideas and themes I wanted to pursue, but I could only do one, obviously. So that was the most challenging part definitely for me. And obviously using tools and things I've never used before, such as the disc sander and all these tools I've never used. So that definitely was a bit of a challenge. What inspires me is probably, I went to a lot of galleries before starting my artwork. I love Pinterest, so I'd always go through there and have a brainstorm on that. And I know there's a lot of DIY kind of things on Pinterest, but there's also a lot of great little artists. And I also followed small artists on Instagram and Facebook and things like that. So they definitely inspired me. Oh, I have so many favourite artists, but if I had to choose a few, I'd definitely say Jeff Koons or Damien Hirst. only because I think like the way they have like teams of people working on their art, they've kind of like revolutionised the art and how we perceive it today. My plans this year is to study a double degree in Commerce and Global Studies at Monash University. And yeah, I know this doesn't have much to do with art, but I'll always be surrounded by it and always go to galleries and things like that. I definitely recommend students doing VC art or VCA studio art to definitely find a theme that they enjoy and they can connect to personally, because I feel like if you really like the theme or the idea that you're doing, you're going to put more effort into it and you'll, you know, a better end result basically.
The title of my work, I had a drawing machine that was called Drawing Machine 3, and that involved a big barrel, and what came off that was subsequent drawings that sort of focused around the concepts of fate and coincidence. The idea for me personally, I was quite obsessive generally. I really liked to control everything, and going into studio arts I wanted to change that, and I thought the best way possible would just to be make a machine and let everyone else muck around with it. The way it worked, I had the big barrel. Sometimes myself, sometimes the audience would interact. They'd push it around. Big pushes, abrupt stops, gentle turns, they would all be translated into their own unique line work characteristic. I think the challenging thing was rebelling against myself, very, very obsessive, and then to let someone else essentially do the artwork, watching from a distance was difficult. And sometimes they'd break it, sometimes they'd, you know, roll around on it, jump on it, rip the side off, but it was all part of it. It all gave it a different characteristic and made it more interesting, so just sort of came to accept that in the end. Starting point influence, Cameron Robbins, big influence. I took a lot of my aesthetic ideas from his machines, which involved the weather, and he employs very similar stuff, tripods, pulleys, rope, rocks, LEDs, very similar aesthetic. Architecture's the plan, which more closely aligns with my obsessive nature, but I'll always try and continue art, that's for sure. It's always been a big part of my life. Advice I would give, get it done early. No one wants to be trying to pump out 2 finished works when exams are looming, so I'd say follow my footsteps and do something different. It's more fun. It's don't do what you're comfortable with. If you stay in your comfort zone, you'll never test yourself and you're not going to learn. You learn when you're challenged, you don't learn when you're doing what you're good at.
My work is Untitled Portraits 2018. It's a series of 16 portraits of individuals in their bedrooms, and the whole idea is it's an insight to routine and everyday personal lives, but how they're all connected through the one environment of the bedroom. The photographs are black and white. They're 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres, so they're pretty small, but they're meant to be quite intimate, so you have to come up to the artwork and look into the person and their environment. I used digital DSLR. I experimented with other cameras, a Pentax, a Polaroid, but I found the digital was best for quick capturing of moments. It gave them a relaxed feel. The most interesting part was people's reactions when I asked them to take a portrait of them in their bedrooms. They were uncertain and a bit uncomfortable at first, but the main challenge I had was making sure that they were uncomfortable in their own environment, because I wanted to capture a photo which truly represented them, and you can't capture a person if they don't feel like themselves. My favourite artist at the moment, his name is Anton Corbin. He's a bit of a photojournalist. He started off doing magazines and capturing like singers and artists and stuff like that, and he just has this amazing sense of intimacy. So he uses high contrast in his photos of really public figures. When you look at them, you don't see a famous person, you see a personality, you see someone's true identity. This year, still being at high school, I'm doing visual communication and design and hoping to apply for top design. I have the role of art captain, and I'm looking to expand art into more avenues for students. Definitely listen to your teacher. They have so much knowledge and advice for you. Just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's the best one. There are so many different avenues that one idea has, and you have to explore those. You have to explore your ideas.
I made a shag pile rug called Rug, and I was interested in 70s colour palettes, organic shapes. I played around with geometric and organic throughout the year and found, organic shapes to be really common in colour field work. I made the rug from scratch, basically. I bought about 1.5 meters of rug canvas. You thread the bits of yarn or wool through each individual little line, and it's extremely time consuming with a latch hook. The most interesting bit was the same process used. I'd never heard of it. It was made in the 70s, and around that era was bobbed by my grandmother also, which was pretty cool. What inspired me the most was I was working in a similar fashion to the colour field artists, and the NGV having that field exhibition was just an amazing coincidence. 2019, this year I'll be still at school, so hopefully thinking of more creative ways to do assignments. I'd love to have a career in art of some form, that'd be amazing.
My work is called Entropy's Arrow, and it is a 10.4 metre banner by 20 centimetres, and it's double-sided vinyl, and it's a collection of 35mm photographs that I've taken progressively throughout the course of 2018. In this work, I was exploring the ideas of memory and the intersection between how we experience memory and how we document it through photography and other mediums. The materials I used were a faulty 35mm camera that added these black bars across my photos, and I used a variety of different colour films throughout the year, and once I had the film developed, I then went into Photoshop and I found different elements of the photographs, like different corners or different principles that I could use to connect the images to kind of make one continuous long image in Photoshop. So what inspires me are a lot of analogue filmmakers and photographers like Petra Collins and Robert Dosnier, and how they use film and how they play with light, and I really find the tactility of film very interesting, especially in such a digital era. One of my favourite artists is Sam Christofsky, and he's a New Zealand filmmaker, and he does a lot of music videos for a lot of indie bands, and he does a lot of 16mm filmmaking, and he really plays with the medium and ideas of kind of nostalgia and how that can translate into story making, and I've kind of adopted those elements in my photography and documenting my own life. This year I'm starting a Bachelor of Fine Arts at Victorian College of the Arts, specialising in photography. I'm also getting more involved in the independent experimental film community in Melbourne, so the Artist Film Workshop based out of Fitzroy. There's a really good collective of analogue based artists there, and they're all really great communities, so I'm involved in that. Having completed both art and studio arts, for advice to students, I'd say don't try and overthink what you're going to do for finals, just kind of follow the art process and explore a new medium you've never tried and see where that takes you, and throughout the process you'll be a lot more satisfied with what you end up making.
My work being featured, the title is Little Raccoon, and it's basically me just drawing what I find attractive. I guess I made the male portrait with ideas in mind like femininity, fashion, childhood stuff, primary colours I focused on. It was all just to kind of have fun with it, because I enjoy drawing portraits and I don't think you need anything complicated or avant-garde. I think you should just draw what you love. My portrait as it is a digital print on canvas, but I didn't draw it on the canvas. I actually drew it in a program called Paint Tool Sci. It's nothing complex, it's basically $60, and I use Photoshop at the very end to just touch it up and make it really colourful. The biggest problem for me is to keep a consistent art style between the two pieces. My art style changes every month. I can't stay consistent for the life of me, even if I try to, because I wanted these pieces to be very similar to each other. Like if they're hung up side by side, they look like they pair with each other. I found it difficult. Everything inspires me. It's hard to settle on one thing. I think you can find inspiration in anything. Starting points on my artwork, you'd have to take it all the way back to the start of the year when I only had a brainstorm and that was it. I knew that at the start of the year my strength is portraiture. I didn't limit myself from then. I just said I wanted to draw somebody beautiful because that's my main focus. Is I enjoy thinking about what makes someone attractive and beauty in the eye of the beholder, how it's different for everyone. And I'd say that was my starting point, just thinking about portraits and thinking about what I like in people. Right now, I'm probably just going to do the same thing I've always been doing, just drawing whenever I have the chance and just kind of doing little challenges to see what I can improve. So my advice would be, don't think that everyone has to be good at studio arts. Like, if you're interested in art, you have to be good at studio. It's not like that at all. I think you can still thrive if you just adapt to the subject and do your best despite what you might not like. I didn't like doing my portfolio, but I stuck with it, and I would always have people to ask for help, like my teacher. So my advice would be just to make the best of it.
The title of my work is called Stereotypical. I did it around the idea of stereotypes and myself. So at the start of the year I did a DNA test and I got back this long list of all these places where I'm from, and it inspired me to do a project about stereotypes and question our need to identify with a set of rules, societal rules. The materials and process I used to bring it together, I did a tethering process, so I had a camera set up on a tripod and a cord connected to my laptop, and because I have a clicker in each photo, I would take a picture and it would pop up on the screen so that I could see if I needed to move, if there was shadows, anything like that. So yeah, that was the whole process. I found most interesting about creating it the technical aspects of it. I'd never done tethering or anything like that before, or any kind of self-portraiture, so it was really interesting to learn that process. But also learning about stereotypes was incredibly interesting. The main artist that really inspired this project was Christian Thompson. His series Australian Graffiti, with the self-portraits with all the plants, that inspired me a lot because it was mixing his culture and his personal life together, which is what I did with my project, and also putting himself in the project, making it a lot more personal, which is also what I did. My plans for 2019 are to take a gap year and go travelling and just see the world and get inspired. And I'm gonna bring my camera with me, obviously, and do a bunch of projects wherever I go. And art will definitely always have a role in my life. It's been in my life since I was born, so it'll always have a role.
The title of my works is, the first one is Presence Standing, and the second one is Presence Atom. With Presence Atom, I liked the idea of appropriating Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam to focus more on just humanity and to really just cut back all the different views in the world and society, I guess, and just to really strip it raw. Presence Standing was constructed with a mannequin as the base, which was glued and put together with all different mannequin pieces, and then it was draped in this rope, which is just a very basic kind of rope. And then I used aerosol paint to paint the whole thing black. Present Atom was much more interesting. That was plaster cast of my brother. That was 8 hours of plaster casting different body parts and then putting it all together, which was very interesting. Then painted black, then had all the rope draping off it. A lot of my inspiration comes from a lot of philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, Descartes, and Wittgenstein, and people like that. But also I really find Marina Abramovic really interesting. She's probably my favorite artist. I've just always been fascinated with how far she pushes her body when it comes to her performances. Well, in 2019, I plan on going to Victorian College of Arts at the Uni of Melbourne, doing a Bachelor of Fine Art in sculpture, which will be really good. I'm really excited for that. The biggest thing that helped me when it came to, because I did studio art and art in year 11 and 12, the biggest thing that helped me was really give yourself time just to think and just sit with ideas for periods of time, just to really grill them. Like, you just want to really beat the idea until it's as solid as you think you can get it.